right. Welcome back to the Partnership Mastermind Podcast, where we cut through the noise and get real about building partner ecosystems that actually drive revenue and career growth. Today's guest has scaled products and partner ecosystems from first dollar to first billion. At Google, he brokered first-in-kind alliances with some of the biggest names in e-commerce. At Narvar, he turned post-purchase headaches into loyalty moments by weaving together carriers, platforms, and retailers. And now at Auctane, he leads global partnerships across brands like ShipStation and Stamps.com, embedding shipping where merchants actually work. He's also our newest mastermind instructor, helping coach partner leaders on how to earn executive trust and drive activation over logos. Michael Haswell, thrilled to have you here.
Thrilled to be here, Chris.
All right, man, let's do it. So we kick off every episode with a fast five, quick, tactical, and a little bit fun. Just the first thing that comes to mind. You ready for that?
I'm ready.
All right, cool. Look, you're someone who travels a ton, right? So first question is, wheels up for a partner summit or a big client meeting. What's one travel ritual that you never skip?
So regardless of arrival time, it could be after midnight. I'm not getting a workout in, but I take a walk around the neighborhood just to ground myself in the place. Hopefully there's some trees around, and I can center myself and prepare for the next day.
Love it. Cool. Definitely a good tip there. All right, the next one. So you've dealt with a lot of high stakes negotiations in your career. So I'm curious, what's the perhaps funniest or most peculiar clause or red line you've ever seen in a negotiation?
So this one was an easy one for me. Back in my Yahoo days, we had hired a big studio executive, Terry Semel, who had spent decades at studios like Warner Brothers. And there was an account executive trying to get a deal done with a competing studio. And so he took our standard ad T's and C's, just insertion order to advertise on Yahoo, and included a 15-minute consultation with our CEO, Terry Semel. So I had to unwind that bit.
That's hilarious. Wow. Okay, cool. I think if people listening to this are going to get funny ideas and try to incorporate those into their agreements as well. Cool. Next one. Next question is, and this is related to how I find you to be very poised, calm demeanor, even in high tense situations. That's where this next question comes from. So in a tense meeting, maybe it's an executive QBR with a big partner. How do you kind of apply your mantra of meeting people where they are, while holding strong opinions loosely, but keeping a 1-to-1 say-do ratio? And what's that approach look like? How do you basically keep that calm demeanor in those high stakes environments?
Yeah. I think it's important at the outset to set ground rules or promises. And so one of the ones one of my defaults is debate the issue and not make it personal. I think people in heightened scenarios can devolve into personal attacks. If that does happen, it's time for a break. And I'll take the person running hot, if it's on our side or their side, and just do a check-in. What's going on? There's so much that operates below the surface. I mean, it could be something as much as a spouse going through a sickness. Or it could actually be a substantive disagreement. But that check-in, again, outside the room is critically important. And then inside the room, I call it negotiating from the same side of the table. So I'm in e-com SaaS. I imagine most SaaS companies, when they're dealing with platforms or other technology partners, there's a shared merchant, right? And so how can we orient the issue around solving that shared merchant's problem?
I love the last piece, anchoring the negotiation around like, hey, let's remind ourselves what we're all working towards here to like help mutual customers win. And I really appreciate your advice on when the stresses get high, like take a pause and don't let things escalate too quickly. Candidly, as someone who like growing through up the leadership ranks, that's something that was hard for me to always get right, because I felt so protective of my team. And sometimes I would be combative with other cross-functional leaders, and we'd get into it because it's like, well, you're doing things that are directly hurting my team, and I sometimes would let my emotions get the best of me. So it's good to hear, a leader like yourself that I respect say, hey, look, things will get hot, but like just cool things down, stop the meeting, so to speak, and like isolate that person who's really hot and kind of get them back on the right track.
Yeah, I mean, I think the other thing, I've fallen into that trap too early in my career, is as a manager, you feel like you're the umbrella for sort of
Yeah.
the organizational rain that showers down, and the default mode there can be defensiveness, but
Yep.
you really need to reorient who the team is. The team as a leader is really your cross-functional peers, because you
Yeah.
are collectively marching toward a common goal. And so you may have to take your team at task sometimes if they're not sort of
Yeah.
keeping their eye on the ultimate objective.
Yeah, yeah, I appreciate you saying that. I think that's a good teaser for anyone who's interested in joining Michael's program on really how to earn your seat at the leadership table. Your leadership team is your team first and foremost, because if you're not strong with them, you can't possibly show up strong enough for your actual direct reports. So I think that's a key
100%.
lesson.
100%.
Sweet, cool. Next Fast Five question is, what's one early signal that a shiny logo, could be a partner, could be a customer, won't actually move the needle? And what do you test instead?
Yeah, well, for me and really for any partnerships executive, it begins with the numbers. You know, does the model bear it out? Do you have sound assumptions? And if not, that's okay. The second assessment is, will you enjoy the halo effect, right? Will this generate pipeline just by being in market? And, you know, is there a market narrative your executive team wants to put out there? So, you know, in my current role, we have a very small deal with one of the big tech companies around data, predictive analytics, generative AI, which again isn't a market making deal from a revenue perspective, but being aligned with one of the big tech companies on AI does have value in the market. So I think it's start with the quant and move to the quality, and don't just hang your hat on a press release.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. And I think that's also good advice for anyone listening who's maybe early career IC or even mid-level management of, you know, it's easy to construct your own OKRs as an example. Any competent person should understand like what they're held responsible for. But the more you can understand what that answer looks like for the CEO and then the rest of the C-suite, and then like your reporting chain. So if you're a partner manager and you have a manager of partnerships, then a VP of partnerships, and then maybe the CRO and then the CEO, it's like, well, how can you figure out how to align working backwards from the CEO to understand what they care about from an OKR perspective, and how does that translate down to what your OKRs are? And the more you're going in the right direction with the company versus the other direction, I think you're going to have a much better time. Cool.
100%.
Last question for you on the opener, Michael, is, so we have a lot of people listening to this podcast who are like senior IC or early stage management, and they're looking to break into, director, senior director, VP level. In your opinion, what's the fastest way to earn executive trust on, say, a brand new initiative that someone brings to you? Right. So how would you advise, say someone's listening right now and they have this seemingly great idea. They've done their homework and they really want to pitch it to someone like yourself at the VP level. What's the best advice you could give them to help, establish trust quickly and increase their chances of getting a yes?
Yeah, I mean, I tend to break it down into the why, the what, and the how. And oftentimes we sort of go to the what. That last question. Do the numbers pan out? But understanding how this thing fits in the greater whole, how it ladders up to the enterprise strategy, and just being very cognizant of our why, particularly at the C-suite. They want to understand that this is sort of your highest and best use, even if the numbers bear out. Are you chasing a $1 million opportunity, but there's a $10 million opportunity you're leaving on the table? And then I former manager, his term was the work back plan. So if you've set that sort of why and what the end state, what great looks at, what does week 1 look like? What does week 2 look like? What does week 3? I think we can over rotate on the what, without laddering up to the why and without laddering down to the how. Okay, how do we operationalize this thing so we'll be launch ready in a month, in a quarter, in a year?
Yeah, that's excellent. And anyone listening, that should give you a really strong starting point. And then one of the ways I translate that, Michael, is, again, when you're early stage, IC, mid-level manager, you only have so much perspective on what the company cares about and what's going on within the company. So it's a natural tendency to build your proposals from a bottom-up perspective, which is from your own perspective, given everything you know. But to your point, Michael, it sounds like that, but importantly coupled with a top-down strategy of like, hey, like what does the leadership team care about, right? And the more you can have a firm understanding of that, the better you're able to craft a proposal that is in line with what they're already thinking about. If you know, as an example, a couple of years ago, I had an executive QBR with Klaviyo, and end of 2023 going into 2024, which for anyone listening is like the sun or Jupiter in the e-commerce solar system. And I said to them, I was like, hey, look, I understand pipeline and revenue are table stakes, but like, help me understand, like, what's the most valuable form of revenue and pipeline for you? And they said, okay, that's easy. In 2024, we want to move up market, right? Because this is just on the heels of their IPO. So like, we really want true enterprise deals. We're super strong in North America and on Shopify. So we're trying to penetrate non-Shopify ecosystems, and we're really trying to penetrate Europe. So if you can bring us deals that are a true enterprise, non-Shopify, and in the Europe market, then giddy up. And it's like, okay, great. Now I have a mandate, right, as the leader of my department, to go back to them and say, hey, look, if we really want to get in the good graces of Klaviyo, which everyone's trying to do, for every deal that we can generate for them that meets this criteria that we've heard from their executive team, then we're going to have a much better time getting by. Does that kind of resonate, Michael, with what you meant by laddering up and working back from like what the company ultimately cares about?
100%. And I mean, there's so many ways in which we can unpack your anecdote. Those who are strong in North America but weak in Europe, and those strong in Europe and weak in North America, there's a natural synergy there where you're delivering mutual value on day one. I also like the notion of unequal trades, right? Things that are very important to the partner, but don't particularly matter to you. I had an opportunity where our finance and accounting team was looking at payment solutions, and at least from an accounting perspective, largely commoditized. So it doesn't really matter whether it's Stripe or Adyen or PayPal or insert your payment provider there. But if they have meaningful distribution to help me achieve my goals, well, why not tip the scale, right? Put the thumb on the scale.
Got it. I think that's a great closeout on that topic. So, okay, that was the Fast Five. I think we're plenty warmed up now. Now we're getting into a few segments. We're going to start kind of earlier in your partnerships career, and then we're going to progress through that together. So the first one is your origin story, right? So you started your career commercial counsel on market making web 1.0 deals, and somewhere along the way decided business development was where the real fun and impact live. So, take us back, right? What was that moment where you crossed from, say, legal to BD, and ultimately what pulled you in and kept you in?
Yeah, they're remarkably similar functions, with the exception that lawyers are a licensed profession. And so, cross-functional stakeholders sort of tiptoe around legal issues.
Right.
But when you really think about it, aside from legal compliance, right? Abiding by privacy laws and processing data in the proper way, everything at the end of the day is a business issue. So one of the things I tell my team is act like an owner. There are no product issues. There are business issues that implicate a product stakeholder. Likewise, there aren't legal issues. There are business issues that implicate a legal stakeholder. So limitation of liability, whether that's $1 million to 10 million or 100 million, that's a business decision. Are you extracting enough value from the relationship that you're willing to assume a $10 million liability? If so, then make the call. So they're very similar. And then, feeding my ego a little bit, lawyers only get recognized when they screw up. business development professionals, they're the ones
Yeah.
on stage at all hands meetings,
Yeah.
getting the
I
applause. So I
see.
figured, why not shift from riding shotgun to driving?
I love. We appreciate honesty on this show. So we appreciate you bringing the real stuff there. So I can totally get that. Okay. So okay, then moving on. Then early on you said that you believe there's always a right and wrong answer, right? And that business people were purely rational actors, right? So how did that mindset in the early days cost you deals, and ultimately what replaced that? I found that interesting in your intake, kind of around that topic.
Yeah, look, a legal education is highly theoretical, where
Right.
the best argument is rewarded academically. When you get into the business world, and this is intuitive to everyone listening to this podcast, there's a lot of gray and complexity in the world. There really isn't a whole lot of black or white. And I felt like I had to win every argument. And again, this is likely intuitive to everyone listening to the podcast. You have to choose which hills you're going to die on and let the others sort of fall by the wayside. In terms of rational actors, I lost sight of the fact that companies don't do deals, people do deals.
Right.
And people have incentives that don't necessarily line up with the company incentives. To some extent, I figured I was dealing with autonomous agents like we are in this AI world, but we're not. We're dealing with blood
Yeah.
and,
Yeah.
and flesh and irrational actors, and you just have to factor that into your negotiation strategy.
Okay. So thanks for that, Michael. The follow-up question on that is, can you give us a story of an early deal, perhaps, where reading stakeholders correctly maybe turned a near miss into a win? Because it sounds like what you're saying is, the good actors are the bad actors. Reading stakeholders sounds like something that is so important, especially as you get into more leadership positions. So curious if you have a story where that maybe showed up.
I do. So I was early in my tenure at Google, and we were the only company that did not have a deal with Starbucks, which had a dynamic chief digital officer. They were actually early to mobile payments and doing it really, really, really well. They had an iTunes deal with Apple. Yahoo powered their Wi-Fi. They virtually worked with everyone other than Google. And I knew the chief digital officer was coming into town. I said, hey, let's not meet at the office. Let's meet at the New Old Pro. So for the Silicon Valley acolytes, that's a 50-year-old bar, peanut shells on the ground. At one point, there was a bull you could ride in the middle of the bar. And I sat him down, I bought him a beer, and I said, just talk to me. Why has it been so hard to land on a strategic initiative with Google? What are others doing that we're not?
Yep.
And really just listen to understand. And he laid it out, and it didn't generate any activity immediately, but I kept the conversation going. We were trying to do, at that time, Groupon and Living Social, and these prepaid vouchers were a big deal. Google was launching its own Google Offers platform. Starbucks had never done one. So Starbucks was sort of my white whale to get them to launch our platform, first ever Starbucks gift card offer.
Wow.
And I got a call from the CDO probably 6 weeks later and said, hey, our CEO, Howard Schultz, is really investing in generating local jobs. And he's got this nonprofit, Local Jobs for America. And this was a time when a lot of the causes were selling wristbands, the Live Strong, cancer stuff. And they were selling wristbands. And I said, well, how about if as part of this prepaid voucher for Starbucks, part of the proceeds went to this local nonprofit? And that brokered a conversation between Howard and our then CEO, Eric Schmidt. mission-driven alignment. Went live, and I think it's still the largest prepaid voucher. I think we sold 800K in a day.
Wow. I mean, I love that story. And I think it opens up another can of worms going off script for my own interview outline, which is this concept of like following signals, right? Like looking for signals. And then once you see them, just like pivoting in real time. And I would love to spend some time on that, Michael, because the example you just gave is like a masterclass for anyone listening, where it's like, Michael had, obviously when you started this whole conversation, you obviously had an end game in mind of like, I would love to do some type of deal, but you couldn't possibly predict how it was going to go. And there's a famous Steve Jobs quote from a Stanford commencement speech he gave where he said, look, you can never connect the dots in the future. You can only connect the dots in the past. You can only look backwards and rationalize why things worked out the way they did. And after enough evidence, you can start to just trust that things will do it in the future, right? So to relate that back to your anecdote there, I would love to hear your thoughts for our listeners on like, hey, the importance of have a strong hypothesis, have your conviction, but the most important thing is you just get into it, right? Like roll up your sleeves and get messy. And then as you see signals, as you learn things, then pivot and capitalize on those new learnings, right? Hopefully this makes sense. But one of the biggest things I've seen held partner manager and partner people back is that they're oblivious to some of the obvious signals that are staring them front in their face. And they feel like they have to go through some type of checklist instead of deprioritizing their work and saying, you know what, I'm going to go all in on that one and see where it takes me. Hopefully that made sense, Michael, but just curious if that resonates.
Oh yeah, deeply resonates. I mean, the trite meme is don't lose the forest for the trees. I think we can get into such tunnel vision execution mode, implementing the playbook. Not to mix metaphors, but sometimes you do have to call an audible. And I found asking calibrating questions, showing you've done your research. Like, hey, I listened to the latest earnings. Priority 1, priority 2, priority 3 came through clear as day. Am I reading that right? And you'll either get validation, and that helps as you move forward, or they'll say, yes, those 3, and this 4th thing is getting a lot of CEO attention. Or actually, no, you misread it. It's thing 4, 5, and 6. And so coming in with a hypothesis of, hey, this seems like a big thing for you. Am I right? And then just listening to understand. I think particularly partnerships professionals in negotiation mode, they're thinking of how to respond before really processing the answer and let it land. I would say one of the things that more mature partnership professionals are comfortable with is silence. Just letting it land.
Yeah, I was trying to be silent there. That's why. But I appreciate, and this opens up a good kind of next line of questioning. But I totally agree, having been someone who struggled with that very concept of, look, like it can be really intimidating, right? Like partnerships, I think partnerships is a unique role where you can be thrust into some really high leverage situations, dealing with like very senior people on the other side versus other roles, right? Like maybe in customer success, sales, and marketing, you maybe don't get this type of exposure to like 20-year veterans who are like VPC level situations. So candidly, it can be very intimidating, right? Like imagine you're a tech partner manager at like some Series C company and you're in a conversation to have some integration built out and you're dealing with some like big time VP of product at some other much bigger company. Well, like it's easy to crap your pants in the situations, especially on the negotiation side. So I like your tip there, Michael, of it's okay to be quiet and just listen and just really get as much information as you can, right? Like, so that's my next question for you, Michael, is for any partner pro listening, especially the partner managers, how would you advise them and coach them on how to approach, say, the discovery phase better? Let's just restrict our conversation to kind of the early days of a potential new partnership. How would you advise them to approach the discovery phase of asking just the right amount of questions, but doing a lot more listening, obviously, than talking, so you have a lot more information to then leverage in kind of pitching them on something you can do together?
Wow. Great question. I think, sorry, I'm
You're good.
processing. I think discovery is a never ending phase. I think, asking questions to understand,
Yep.
a starting point or where people want to end up, and then continually calibrating. I mean,
Right.
I don't think this is the direction in which you wanted me to take the answer, but
No, I get it.
I think I think a lot of deals go off the rails because a partner manager fails to check in, confirm that expectations are reality, and things haven't happened behind the scenes. So for me, it's probably not the
Yeah,
answer
I
you
get it.
wanted. For me, discovery is an evergreen, even post signature as you get to activation. For me, those questions are part of a commitment to continuous improvement,
I
right?
like that. I'm picking up what you're laying down. Basically, it's like, look, like this is an evergreen thing, and you can't just capture the information on day one and just assume that that's the end of the story. Partnerships are so dynamic because they're like, if you think of entropy, there's so many things changing at your own company, and there's so many things changing at your partner's company, and the market's changing, right? So like, in 4 dimensions, like the probability that things are going to stay the same is literally 0%. So how can you stay dynamic? How can you implement systems to understand how things are evolving at your partner's org in real time? And then, to our earlier conversation, pivoting in real time, right? Both
Yeah.
capitalizing on new information that can help you and reacting to new information. Maybe your partner's launched some competitive product and you need to kind of de-risk that situation. So I think not being ignorant to the dynamics of an evolving relationship, I think is one of my key takeaways for that, Michael.
Yeah, and most of these are first in kind deals or first in a few where you may not have the playbook yet. So it's about navigating ambiguity and it's about adaptability. I think that's I love the strides you and Partnership Mastermind have taken in terms of playbooks and a more data driven approach. That's absolutely what we need to do. And it's also true that partnership professionals have to be adaptable. And it's not, I need to ask these 10 questions. It's, oh, I got a non-intuitive answer to question number 3. Let me pull that thread
Yes.
to understand, maybe I'm missing something.
Yeah, I love that. And that takes us to our second last segment, which is just all about like the modern day partner professional, your view on kind of hiring best practices and characteristics that you look for. But I like how you said, the importance of like leaning into the data. And, we recently interviewed Bob Moore, CEO of Crossbeam, on the pod a couple of weeks ago. And his big stance is like, look, one of the biggest things holding back partner pros is y'all are inventing your own metrics, right? That don't translate into the board meetings, right? So like, yes, like we use common terms like pipeline, et cetera, et cetera. But, the more you come up with like your partner qualified leads and like partner influence, and you're trying to like substantiate your compensation and get paid on like these metrics that aren't the metrics that are literally reported in board level meetings, he's like, you're always going to hit a plateau until you like translate the message. So the next question for you, Michael, is, what kind of responsibility do you feel as a leader to make sure that from a reporting perspective, you're setting your team up for success, where you're saying, hey, look, you're going to be measured on these leading and lagging indicators that, are steeped in partnership nuance, but ultimately will be such that I can report effectively across the leadership team, on the ELT team, in a way that they understand. Like the question is, how do you view the importance of your position in reporting and showcasing the impact that your department is having in a way that is easily translatable, and you don't have to spend so much time trying to explain what acronyms are and different data points. It's just easy for your ELT team to get on first glance.
Yeah. I mean, I wish I had a silver bullet response here. I would say this is one of the biggest adaptive challenges for partnerships professionals. Because to your point, you want to ladder up to a common set of definitions and metrics. And it's also true that we're not sales and we're not marketing. And so how do you capture that nuance?
Right.
Partnerships, unless you're in a highly transactional space, partnerships is not really a numbers game. It's not all top of funnel and deal cycle and close rates. It's, again, apropos of you bring a $10 million opportunity to the C-suite, but are you leaving $100 million opportunity on the table? So I think it's sort of a combination between laddering up where it makes sense, but then also calling out sort of the strategic significance. We have a new chief strategy officer here at
Just saw that yesterday.
Auctane, and he shares my orientation toward big rocks. Like, let's not report on every platform and marketplace we have in our portfolio, but let's focus on either the largest drivers of growth or the problem children that we need to remediate. For me, it's focusing on big rocks in a way that is translatable across the C-suite.
Yeah, and that's been a constant theme throughout this interview, which I'm glad to see, which is like translating it up, like rolling it up to what the C-suite and ELT team cares about. And for any partner manager listening, you might be like scratching your head, like, okay, well, how does that show up, right? How does the quota that I own and the KPIs that I own, how do I actually translate the message? And the best way I've learned how to do that with partnership oriented metrics is, look, at the end of the day, we have two primary responsibilities, right? We need to create pipeline and we need to move pipeline. Sometimes we move pipeline that we created and sourced. Sometimes we're moving pipeline that we didn't create. Maybe it was sourced from another function, but ultimately our job is to move it. So the better you're able to build super clear reporting models and dashboards and data sets that very cleanly show, without any ambiguity and no attribution bull jive, hey, this is the pipeline we created and this is the pipeline that we've moved, right? Whether it's moving it one step down in the funnel or all the way to the bottom. Literally, if you can start reporting across the company and upwards, pipeline, created, pipeline moved, what it looks like and how it rolls up to the broader strategic narrative, you will have a much better time kind of getting credibility across the org, getting buy-in, getting budget. But I see so many head of partnership people, who are a team of one, right? So there's a lot of head of partnerships in the market that are a team of one. And it's like, well, what's the issue? And they're like, well, I can't get any extra budget. And I'm like, well, why is that? And they're like, well, they just don't believe in the value of the department. And to be blunt, sure, maybe some companies implicitly don't, but any good CEO or good CRO will absolutely invest in things if there are strong growth signals. So I think the biggest gap is that they don't know how to storytell, right, with the right data. So curious if that resonates with you, Michael, this concept of people will complain, not just in partnerships roles, but that's what we're talking about. They'll complain that the company doesn't get it or doesn't want to invest in partnerships. But in reality, that person just hasn't developed enough of a storytelling muscle where they're leaning into the data and showing that, hey, what I'm asking for is an investable decision for this company. And here's why.
Yeah, I mean, that's great perspective. There's so much there to unpack. I would say, I think we can put thoughtful investment cases in strategic partners, and a lot of strategic partners look great on paper. But again, it's not just the capabilities, it's also the willingness to partner. So understanding who the right partners are, and then the more salient point to your comment, I had a deal come across my desk. It's the right partner. Objectively, they are leaning in, but the first deal in the door is measured in tens of thousands, where
Right.
strategic deals for us are in the millions. So is that part of a land and expand strategy? How does 50K become 500K, become 5 million, become 10 million? So even in a transactional practice, I think partner managers thinking, okay, this is my first $2,500 license. You know, what is the white space? Why is this again the
Yeah,
highest and
yeah.
best use of my time?
Yeah, I love that. One of the ways I was trained by some of my mentors is like specifically for partner managers pitching bosses like you on proposals is like, imagine you're like a startup founder pitching VCs, right? And to that last conversation, Michael, you're basically presenting the TAM, SAM, and SOM, right? It's like the
Yep.
SOM is small, right? Like, sure, it's a $2,500 or $2,500 licensing deal, right? But we're going to quickly gobble up, and monopolize this little tiny niche market. And if that checks out, then that will give us confidence to access and invest more resources in pursuit of the SAM, which is much bigger. And then the holy grail white space, to your point, is this full TAM. This is what it looks like, right? And like literally treating it like that VC pitch where you're showing everything. You're showing progress. You're showing a clear hypothesis, an understanding of the market. You're showing the team, like literally cross-functionally. Who is the team? What are you asking for? Right. And this is another parallel to VC pitch decks, right, Michael, that you maybe resonate with. The clarity of your ask is surprisingly low in many cases, right? And I've been guilty of this myself. Like, you need to be specific on what are you asking for. You're not just asking, hey, marketing team, can you help me with this? That's not an actual ask, right? It's like, hey, marketing team, I'm asking for $150K in MDF, right, to find these specific activities with this specific partner, with this specific hypothesis and time-bound gap in mind, right? Can we talk about it? So that's the next question for you, Michael. Does that analogy kind of track with you of like how you can think about approaching these like formal proposals, like really doing more of the due diligence, really making it clear what that like land and expand, crawl, walk, run path looks like? In your opinion, would
Absolutely.
that land well with you as an executive?
Absolutely. I mean, I had one of those literally this week. Product partnership. So a third party integrating functionality into our product suite. We have 3 phases of rollout. One hitting before peak here, in e-com, one hitting in Q1, one hitting Q2. And my team came to me and said, hey, if we pull forward phase 2, we can unlock incremental revenue. Like, well, what does that mean? Like, be very discreet. What pieces of features and functionality are you pulling forward from phase 2?
Yeah.
That, product and eng needs to scope, and then model out the actual. And so we got down to not just pull forward phase 2, but pull forward aspects 1, 2, and 3, assess that lift. And then those 3 components, if implemented before November 1, will drive XX million. So it went from an amorphous, hey, let's just pull stuff in sooner, to, no, if we do these 3 things,
Right.
then with very sound assumptions, we can drive this fixed, this absolute number of revenue.
Yeah, that's a really powerful example that should give a lot of validation to anyone listening. And a key takeaway that you should be listening to is, hey, as much as you got to convince your boss, someone like Michael, to buy in, eventually for bigger decisions, Michael then needs to go convince someone else, maybe his boss, right? And the more information and you can give someone like Michael, your boss or your leader, the more you're almost prepping them to then go sell your idea to the final decision maker, which could be CRO, could be CSO, or could be CEO. So don't discount the importance of not just getting buy-in from your immediate, manager, so to speak, but once they say yes, are they confident and well prepared enough to then go to their boss, right, and make a similar pitch with conviction and confidence, right? So that's why, to Michael's point, the devil's in the details, and the more specifics and preparation you can do, right? If you think you're ready to go pitch your boss on a huge idea, wait at least 24 hours is one of the tips I got from one of my mentors, because you probably haven't done all the homework you need to do. So, I love going fast in most cases, but when it comes time to these big pitches, I do think the devil's in the details, and you could probably benefit from a bit more time, if that makes sense, Michael.
I agree. Or set expectation with your manager.
Fair,
like, hey,
fair.
I'm workshopping this thing, and I would love your feedback on A, B,
Right.
and C.
Got it. Cool. Last question on this segment is just around your view and opinion on what are the most important characteristics for, partner manager type profiles, which is to say, hey, if I was a recruiter working for you and I said, hey, Michael, what are the most important characteristics I should be keeping in mind as I go hunt for star partner managers for you? Given where we're at in the market, what are some characteristics that you view as must have? Meaning if I bring you a candidate and they're missing one of these characteristics, it's probably going to be a red flag for you.
Yeah, I would say operational rigor and a writing orientation. I think particularly in venture-backed startups, they can operate tribally in an environment where partnerships is not well understood. So having that operational rigor and documenting is critically important. We talked about sort of the tunnel vision and not seeing the forest for the trees. I want someone with the art of the possible in them. We talked about adaptability and navigating ambiguity. Strong bias to action. This is, Chris, where I think I could learn from you. I understand not to let the perfect be the enemy of the good, but I wish I shipped as prolifically as you did. You do.
I appreciate that. But look, that's really great advice. Anyone listening, certainly a partner manager, now you're hearing from a really bona fide respected leader on what principles and characteristics they think are important. So if that's you, then that should give you more conviction. And if those characteristics are maybe not strong for you, then at least you know where maybe you should be focusing. I resonate with everything you said. Some other ones that I personally look for is just really geeky spirit, really curious, right? One of the simplest tests, and if you use Notion, you can actually see this, is, when the CEO releases the quarterly QBR for the whole company or whatever, or annual retro, who reads those documents, right? It always fascinates me to look at who reads those documents. A lot of times there'd be some surprising, really junior, even SDR people reading these things. I love people who want to understand how the company works, right? And it doesn't just clock in and clock out. People who are curious, they want to understand the investor updates and the annual retros. Those are the people who give a shit. And they know that the more they understand about their company and what the CEO is saying, what everybody else is saying, the more they can leverage that in their positive direction. So that's the last question for you there, Michael, is what do you think about people who just have this penchant of curiosity? They have to get the answers.
Intellectual curiosity would have been on my list as well. I think, to your point, not only understanding intimately the company, but also the market and the industry. So,
Yes,
I spend time in the industry news Slack channel, and I can tell you the most prolific posters in that channel are the highest performers because they're students of the market
100%.
and the industry in which they operate.
I love that. And that's a perfect segue into our final segment to take us home, which is the terrific news that you're not just a guest, but you're actually going to join the Partnership Mastermind family as an instructor. And I'm absolutely thrilled. I've respected you for a long time. You've been a mentor and a friend to me for the last number of years. And I think you have this great program that's going to help a lot of folks who are kind of mid to senior career take the next step in their career. So my first question on that is, why teach now, right? And maybe what gap in formal partnerships training are you looking to help close with your program?
Yeah, look, I mean, this is a very personal pursuit for me. So both my parents are retired public school teachers. So your academic background resonates with me. I've been a startup advisor for a decade now, usually first-time founders and first-time executives. I've built teams over a 20-plus year career now. And Partnership Mastermind sort of gives me that platform to scale that, to sort of scratch my personal itch, but also reach a broader audience of partner managers and sort of train the next generation, as it were.
I love that. Well, look, we're thrilled to have you. Obviously, you've got teaching in your DNA. So now let's talk about your specific program and course. Give us the one-line promise, so to speak, of your course, right? What changes for a student who ultimately goes through your programs and really leans in?
You will elevate your executive communication, which will then put you on the radar for executive roles and ultimately accelerate your career.
Love it. I love short and sweet answers. And look, anyone listening to this, if going through Michael's program can help you earn your first big executive job 3 or 6 months faster, I would encourage you to think about how much was that worth it to you, right? It's definitely worth a whole lot more than the admission fee for this program. Let's just say that. So one of my last questions for you, Michael, is, describe your ideal student, right? That's going to come through this program. What problems are they facing coming in? We already know what the outcomes that they're looking to leave with. And just to give you a second while you think, for me and my own programs that I've run, I want people who will come in and humble themselves, right? One of my intake questions is like, what's your average quota attainment the last 6 months? And usually 20% of them are 100+%, right? And that's fine. But I want people to come in and be like, you know what? I'm very clear on my skill gaps. I am going to attack the shit out of filling that gap by leaning all the way into this program, right? So they're not lurkers. They're people who lean in. That's what I look for. Curious how you would describe your ideal student.
So we've talked a lot about skill versus will. You have to have the will to improve. So I want people who lean in. I think it's those who recognize narratives need to be tailored to audiences, but they really haven't figured out the how. Is sort of my sweet spot.
I love that. I think that's great. And anyone listening who, if that sounds like you and those are the outcomes you're looking for, then we certainly encourage you to reach out. We'll have running programs. So whenever you're listening to this, there's chances are there's an upcoming cohort with Michael. The final question, and this one I imagine is actually going to be one of the most valuable kind of questions for a lot of folks, is imagine right now you're sitting as a director of partnerships, senior director of partnerships, head of partnerships. They're all kind of similar. Not an executive team member, right? A lot of head of partnerships people like to say they're an executive. They're not yet, but they want to get to that level. If you were to give them one piece of advice, maybe it's based on what you think holds most people back. What's the most valuable tip you could give someone who's stuck seemingly at that director, senior director, or head of partnerships to break into a VP role, either at their own company or potentially getting another one? And I'll preface this, Michael, by saying right now in the market, knowing a lot of people, that is a big, big barrier to break through, right? A lot of people can get these director and head of partnerships jobs, but penetrating the ELT team and getting your first big VP title has proven to be quite elusive and challenging for a lot of people. So curious what you think might be holding people back and what advice you might give folks who are looking to make that huge leap.
I think it comes down to self-awareness and awareness of the system, which sounds pretty academic, but what it really comes down to is how are you showing up?
Yeah.
To the point where for really important meetings, before I enter the conference room or the virtual conference room, I'll take a moment of mindfulness. Like, okay, yeah, I just had a fight with my kid. I got to check that at the door. My objectives are this. The people in the room are these. That sort of self-awareness and how you're showing up. And then awareness of the cues of how others are showing up, and what their norms are, right? Presenting to a CEO with a product background is very different than presenting to a CEO with a go-to-market background.
Right.
So for me, it's
yep.
Meet people where they are and have really great self-awareness of where you are.
Yeah, I think that goes back to the humility element of it all. So I really, checking your ego at the door, I really like that. And the last thing I'll say that what you said reminds me of is I had this, one CEO I was reporting to a few years ago, and she was kind of answering some questions in like, in on-site all hands. And it was like, how does she think about promotions, right? Especially for senior folks. And she said something so simply that stuck with me. And she's like, look, obviously we have like formal evaluation process to like, and like committees to like determine who gets promoted. But she's like, the simplest way I'd answer it is, if you think you're, if someone thinks they're a VP of marketing, they're showing up before they even get that promotion like a VP of marketing would. Right. So maybe that resonates with you, Michael, but it's like, if you think you're VP of partnerships and maybe you're a senior director right now or director and you think you earn that, well, then like, are you showing up like a VP of partnerships today? Because you should be showing up like it before you get that promotion if you've really earned it. Right. So what do you think, Michael, about that idea of like, hey, like if you think you deserve a senior partner manager title or director of partnerships title, well, like show us that you're at that level for a little bit of time and we'll notice. Right. So does that resonate with you?
Oh, 100%. And to me, it's really a function of two things. One, being very self-aware, and a part of my curriculum is to undertake that assessment of where you are today. And then either your manager or the company owes you a clear understanding of the rubric for the difference between a senior manager and a director and a senior director. And then it's pretty easy mapping, and you flag your areas for development very quickly and lean into those.
I love that. I think that's a great place to start. Take matters in your own hand, especially at the senior level. But look, Michael, this was honestly a really fun conversation that I've been looking forward to for a long time. Thank you so much for taking the time. We're thrilled to launch your program. You can get in touch with Michael directly or email me or get into my LinkedIn inbox. Plenty of programming available. But again, thank you so much, Michael, for the time.
Thank you, Chris. Had fun.
All right, cool. All right.